straight from Tour de France, right?
Hey.
All right. Good to have you guys. Very good.
Yeah.
Where have you guys been? Have you been biking today?
We don't know the area, so just everywhere.
Around?
Chicago.
Around.
Yes,
Yeah.
right? A rainy day in Chicago.
We're putting our bikes.
Watch this.
There we go.
Oh, that's the way to do it.
Nice and easy.
I'll go in blue.
All right. Well, good to have you guys with us. Good. Nice to meet you. Yes. And you as well. All right.
All right.
So there's a little movie called The Climb.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal for you guys right now. And,
For us, it's huge.
Yeah, for a lot of us
House.
too. For anybody who likes American comedy, it's going to be a big deal. It's quite an interesting story, which I alluded to just a minute ago. And sometimes when we look in the movies, we can point to collaborations between people who have relationships in real life. And there's a long sort of tradition of doing that and looking at where life and art sometimes overlap. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, how you made this eccentric offbeat movie. And I guess we could go back to, well, as many years as we want to, because you guys have been friends for how many years? 13?
10,
11?
11?
I'm going to say 11 at this
Yeah.
point.
11?
That sounds
Who's
right.
counting?
Feels like way
Yeah.
longer.
Feels like way long. And you guys, you know, we should tell everybody here first that The Climb is a movie that's opening this month, and it charts a long time up and down, long-suffering, sometimes relationship between two best friends who go through pretty much everything adult best friends might go through together, and they come out a pretty surprising place at the end of it. So let's talk a little bit about how this movie came to be, and then we'll maybe move back and talk about how you guys met and began this collaboration together. You had a short film version of this in 2018, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We did a short film, which was basically the opening scene of the movie, or a version of it, that we made together that went to Sundance, and that was the start of the feature journey for us.
Yeah, and we got into Sundance, which was very unexpected.
Unexpected why?
Because we've submitted so many films that are not gotten in, so it was one of those things where you
Was it
just
like the sixth time is the charm? Or?
yeah, it's sort of like applying to Ivy League schools. You just kind of do it because you're supposed to. Or I guess for me, I was like, I guess I'm supposed to apply to Harvard, but I'm not going to get in. And so it was sort of the same thing, except the difference is with filmmaking, you have to apply to Harvard every year, and so you get rejected every year. Yeah. So it just became this thing where I think this was like probably the 15th film we've submitted there, and it got in, and we were just a bit caught off guard, and because we had been to the festival and we'd seen sort of the what that as a launch pad can do in terms of just checking a box for financiers and getting people excited and saying, okay, you've now had the stamp of approval, now you can go make something bigger. And we had produced a bunch of 4 or 5 features, and so we kind of had gotten our hands dirty a lot over the years, and we knew that going to Sundance, we could, if we did it right, we might be able to come out of it with like a fast track to getting the movie made.
Parlay it into.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, right. And so it was a 7.5-minute film in 2018.
Yep.
And that 7.5-minute film is almost the opening scene of the new film. Right? So you took that film and you built on it, and we were kind of talking informally earlier a little bit about this, and it'd be interesting to know what exactly it was when you looked at the film that you felt the Sundance audience responded to, that you decided to extrapolate upon into a feature.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were going for a specific tone and a specific style of comedy that we thought was really fun and interesting in the short, and when it got into Sundance, that was really all we needed to try and come up with an idea of how we could extend that out to a feature length. And I think basically we said if we could do a scene as good as the short, another 10 times, that equals enough minutes to fill a feature out, and that was sort of like the baseline of where we jumped off from, was like, all right, can we keep doing scenes as good as this one over and over again and end up with a movie?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I guess that's how we did it. I don't agree with him, but I don't usually agree with him. But that's why, no, I mean, I do obviously sometimes agree with him because he's kind of a creative genius, and I just take the credit. The other thing that we really liked about the short that I think was fun to explore was these two characters, and and their dynamics being what they are, which is like, so the short, I'm assuming you guys have seen it, but the short is, it's the two of us riding bikes up a hill. It's all one shot. And he's kind of out of shape because he hadn't ridden bikes that much. And I revealed to him that I slept with his ex-girlfriend. And he starts chasing me, but he can't catch me. And by the end of that ride, he sort of has come to accept it in a strange way, or like you think he's like, oh, they're going to be fine. They're still going to end up being friends. And we thought that was really potent and interesting because it was like, it was dark, but it strangely felt real because we, half of the thing was based on the fact that I was on a long bike ride thinking about the fact that one of my friends and my ex-girlfriend slept together and going, how am I going to deal with this? Because I'm still going to be friends. Like, they're still going to be.
Are you still friends?
Yeah, we're still friends. But, and I think, and it was a little weird for a while, but and it was like, how do we find comedy in this? And I think that's what we really got excited about, was exploring like sort of comedy in these dark, sad moments, but also this relationship that probably won't change. And like these characters are who they are to one another, and they're gonna go through a lot of things throughout life, and they'll probably end up at the end being almost exactly the same people that they were at the very beginning, except maybe they might learn to accept each other more, be slightly more patient, or just like be a bit less on edge about everything.
It's interesting that you say these characters, and when we see the movie, and I talked a little bit a moment ago, and I'd like to hear a little more about it. We're not quite sure, like who the characters are and who the actors are and the filmmakers are, and if there's a dividing line in certain points, or if not in other points. And so when you guys decided to do this, did you sit down and consciously say, we're writing variations on ourselves, or I'm going to make myself more of a jerk than I am in real life, or I'm going to. I mean, what was the idea to turn them into characters from people? You're using your own names in the film, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think we started off mostly as looking at these as objective characters. There was a conversation at the beginning where we were switched, and I was playing the character that he now plays. So for us, we had a conversation of which one do you want to play, which one do I want to play. So that was sort of, from the outset, we were keeping them a little bit at a distance. And I think when we drew on the characters, we could be objective with them and make them sort of more, I'm more of a doormat, and maybe he's more of an asshole than definitely more of an asshole in the movie than in real life. So I think those things, we were objective about them and pulled from our whole experience of all of our friendships and relationships, not just our personal dynamics with each other.
So Michael said a minute ago that there's a certain degree to which people don't change at a certain point, and you just referred to the polarities of the doormat and the asshole in a way, and so it's quite interesting to watch these two close friends but opposite personality types in a way evolve over the course of a number of years in the film, and to ask ourselves at the end of the movie how different they are versus maybe how they were when we first met them. I don't know if we can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the joy of a movie, is it challenges you to have that thought at the end to decide for yourself where the characters ended up. I think for speaking for my character of Kyle, I think there's traits in Kyle which are considered very noble traits. This like selflessness and like putting others first is, often considered a very noble sort of trait. But when you see it in execution, sometimes you're just like, what the hell are you doing? Like, stand up for yourself, or like say what you want for once. And so I think it's fun playing with those perceptions we have of like, oh, Kyle's the good one, but in some ways I'm as frustrating and as problematic as a character as sort of forward as Mike's character is.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things that we've discovered as we've like screened this film at festivals and talked to audiences, is like people come up to us and be like, your character's the worst to me, and then the person next to them will be like, oh no, I couldn't deal with your character, like wouldn't stand up for themselves. And so it's like they identify with different aspects, and different people perceive different things as virtues. And that is a very interesting thing, because some people go, oh, that mother is horrible, she's trying to do this thing, and why do they even not like his new fiance? And then other people are like, I know exactly who she is. And so this is a particularly interesting movie to see people put their own sort of experience and relationships into, because we are sort of portraying these archetypes in a way, and in some capacity not giving too much exposition as to the reason why we don't like Marissa, or the reason why some of these things happen, and like leaving it open-ended and just only identifying the fact that these are the dynamics and these are the stakes. The family doesn't like her. It is what it is. We're not going to explain why the family doesn't like her, because doesn't really matter.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you made the film, you shot the film in France.
Yeah, the opening.
The opening, right?
Yeah.
So I understand you were influenced, as you were thinking about this movie, by directors like Romer, like Blier, for example. And was it, if we think back to some of Blier's film, even stuff with Gerard Depardieu, young Depardieu, I mean, this sort of camaraderie among young raconteur type friends, we might say, in a way, this must have been on your mind.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, like specifically, like Sauté, like Vincent Francois Paul and the others, and Caesar and Rosalie were like things that we were actively watching over and over again and talking about in the lead up to while we were writing the film, and just letting it kind of seep in thematically, I guess, as opposed to being too direct in terms of the like aesthetic.
There was a fun brashness to those films that we really loved, where characters would just say how they feel and act the way they thought was
Pursue
correct.
Whoever they wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. There was like a freedom to that, and as a character, it's really fun. It's fun to see a character who will walk up and be like, I hate you. And then you're like, okay, well, where does the scene go from here? And like, what are the dynamics at play now? And I think for us, that was always inspiring with that early French cinema.
You could also make a case and say that the movie, on the other side of the coin, is in the tradition of great American independent movies.
Well, I mean, we obviously.
You did do it that way.
Well, I mean, yeah, like Altman is the obvious, I think, aesthetic and stylistic, filmmaker who we are pulling from and looking at and saying, this is, is in the tradition of an Altman film, like where we have voices going in different directions and ensemble, and certainly like the voyeuristic approach to that Christmas scene is certainly pulling from that.
Did you bake all of that into the screenplay, all the different voices at Christmas, or did you encourage people to do what felt right in the moment?
No, it's pretty much all scripted because it was all so heavily cued. Every motion, every line triggered a motion or a camera motion or sound guy moving, so it was all intricately woven. So for us, the way we set up our shoot days were there was one day of rehearsal and then one day of filming for each scene. And if there was anything to be adjusted that Mike would sort of give direction on, it would be during that rehearsal day. But as soon as we started the shoot day, it was pretty much just shoot it until we had it, and everyone was sort of pretty fixed on what they could do.
And how long did you guys spend on the shoot?
I think it was a total of 32 days, but it was like 6 weeks originally, and then, it was like 6 weeks, and then we went down and we waited for winter.
Yeah.
And then we came back, and like in February when we finally got frozen.
We needed thick ice.
That you could fall.
That he could fall through. Yeah.
I guess it took you a month and a half to write this. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was like a month and a half, maybe 2 months before we turned in the script that then we got greenlit that put us into production, but we continued to rewrite, and like basically we turned in the script in May. We continued writing and working the scenes through the summer, or through pre-production, and then we started shooting in August. So it's a bit misleading to say like 2 months, because we were constantly like, we would take a scene and we would bring it to an acting class, and then we'd perform it with each other and maybe cast an actor or two from the class, and then we would workshop some of the dialogue and some of the situations and then tweak it and then go back.
Is there a big gap sometimes between what you write down and what can be said, or what sounds natural when you actually workshop it as such?
I think we tend to write pretty natural, like the way we speak, because we generally are talking each other through, sort of like we discuss with each other when we're doing it. So I think for the most part, I mean, obviously it changes, but for the most part, we're writing the way we talk.
Yeah, what usually happens is you overwrite, or at least for us with this situation, because we were structuring the film in this very elliptical fashion that is telling the story in these like little instances and then jumping ahead and not giving all the information in between. That we felt a little bit of pressure to like over-explain or over-expose some of the information and some of the things, and then when we would get into rehearsing it, we'd be like, don't need to say that, don't need to say that, you just need to say this. And so we would sort of strip it away and get down to what the most potent version of the scene is, and then allow for silences and allow for some of the stuff that we always wanted to, which was like, our mantra even going into this film was, it was patience. It was like we wanted the camera to be patient. We wanted to be patient with our comedy, with everything. And then the other mantra was like impulsiveness. So it was like patience and impulsiveness. And it was this idea that like the characters, the way we film is going to be very impulsive, but it's also going to be patient throughout.
What does it mean to be patient with comedy? Because sometimes we think about comedy as being all about timing and pace and quick snaps or pops in a way. There's a kind of a deadpan offbeatness about this comedy. So what do you mean when you say be patient with it?
For me, I mean, I don't care if it gets a laugh, which is kind of a crazy thing to it's not crazy, but it's like we genuinely said over and over again, like if people care about the journey of these characters and they don't laugh once throughout the movie, that'll suck, but it also will be okay. Like the movie will work. But if people laugh throughout the movie and they don't care about the characters, the movie will not work, and we've failed. And that was, so like in terms of priority, we were always erring on the side of the emotional journey of the characters and making sure that we were invested as filmmakers, and hopefully the audience was invested.
There's also something about tension and relief, and sometimes like in the early, like Buster Keaton and some of like these earlier ones, they did such a great job of like continuing to pull the bowstring back, and you're like you're waiting for the shoe to drop, and they just keep going. And I think it's fun to be able to be like, oh, you think the joke is here, but it's not. It's going to be even more uncomfortable for the next 4 minutes before something happens that sort of breaks it. I think that for us, that was a really fun thing to play with, how far we can pull that back.
Right.
Let's dig into some of the themes in the movie, if we can. And,
oh my goodness.
And let's get serious about what's going on here. I mean, it's interesting. I suppose, like any movie, your interpretation of what's happening to you might be what you bring to the movie. And we're distinctly aware in the movie that there's some off-kilter dimension between the two of you that at certain times borders on manipulation, one might call it. Someone else could call it toxic in a way.
Some have called it.
Have? Uh-huh. That's interesting, and for an hour and a half comedy, it shoehorns in some pretty interesting concepts about what happens when, for example, your longtime best friend progresses to a point in life that you aren't going to make it to, or you're not there yet, and what can happen there. And so I think when you talk about whether people laugh or not, and the comedy of the uncomfortable, and what's really happening between you and the level of anxiety at certain points in the movie, it's pretty interesting. I'd like to hear how you guys would define this, and I'm certainly not asking you to say here's what it is, but you must have had some guiding principles about what it was.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing we were looking at is adult friendships, and those friendships that we have that have been with us for a long time, and exploring the dynamics of what happens when your experiences go so far back in your life to your like formative years, and what effect that has on you now, both in terms of their impact on your life and your responsibility towards those other people. And I think thematically that was something we were really interested in exploring that's not always talked about, and I think is very real to a lot of people. It certainly is real to us in terms of people we have in our lives, and the way that we emotionally are affected by them and emotionally overreact sometimes to things that they do, which might or might not be warranted. So I think thematically that's something we talked a lot about.
Yeah. Did you look at other buddy comedies like maybe Midnight Run or The Odd Couple or any number of classic? You're always dealing with polarities in those, I guess.
Certainly.
So
I mean, we've definitely seen those films. I don't know that we watched them leading into to this film, because it was weird. It was like we were more looking to find inspiration in terms of like filmmaking aesthetic and style and themes, but not in the way that we had a very clear sense of what type of relationship we wanted to explore, and the dynamics of that when it came to like the toxicity or whatever you want to call it with these friends, because the only thing we knew for sure was that these guys would be friends forever. That the bond that they shared, and you know, we talked about making them brothers, and the reason why we didn't make them brothers was because we wanted there to be a choice. When it's your brother, you know, it's not really a strong choice. It's like, yeah, but they're family, so you can't choose to be unrelated to someone. Whereas with a friend, you can choose to be, you know, separated from them or just distance yourself or get rid of them. But when you share a bond with someone that is from a time in your life where you were figuring out who you are as a person and what your identity is, then that gets tied into how you identify yourself. And to let go of that person could, in some ways, feel like letting go of yourself. So like
it's a shared history.
It's a shared history, but it's, you know, when you share a history from 6, 7 years old to 12 or 13, that's the time when you get a sense of who you're going to be as a person and what your personality is and all those things. And I think, you know, that's a hard thing to fully let go of. Like if I saw my best friend from that time period, we would immediately have this sort of understanding of one another because of the nature of that shared experience.
I think the understanding you're talking about translates in the movie to some bittersweet scenes. And there's, for example, a moment in the movie where there's a bachelor party that's going on, and then there's a conversation that happens out on the ice, and there's an embrace that happens out there. And so when I think about the movie and the comedy in the movie, I also think about those scenes and the scene at the end, which I want to get to as well, which to me sort of cuts through all the other noise that we're talking about, and the substance of the relationship comes through the movie. That's got to be between you guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the heart of this whole thing, it's really a conversation about love. You know what I'm saying? Like that, at the heart of it all, it's just about two guys who love each other, and I think that's at the core of the whole relationship. It's why we overlook things with other people around us. I think fundamentally, it's that sort of connection that you have with someone else that supersedes everything else.
Michael, you know, to that point, there's a great sort of, I'd call it a set piece almost, the wedding scene, which to me felt in a good sense like it had an antecedent in The Graduate, maybe, to some degree, and your dialogue in that scene, where you come in, and it's kind of a high wire scene because, I mean, there's a lot happening around you, but you say something very pure and very real, and it's funny when you say it for a moment, but it's also really poignant. I thought that moment, I was taken aback by that moment, because I think that's one of the interesting things about the movie is that tonally, it's pretty sure-footed. You know, we're laughing in one moment, and the next moment, what you're saying is not all that funny. It might be funny in the context of that moment, but it's serious. Yeah. Right?
Totally. I mean, I was definitely, in performing it, I believe I was taking it seriously, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, I think we knew what we were getting into with that scene in terms of the nature of doing anything in a church at a wedding where someone is coming in to stop it in any way. And I think, so I think part of our conversation was like, okay, well, not fully how do we subvert this, but how do we make this feel fresh and different? Because look, it's the movie is structurally just a love story about these two friends, and the beats that it hits are still just like any other sort of love story where I'm coming in to break up the wedding and tell him that I love him, right? But you know, the different thing is like they're just friends. It's not one of these romantic relationships where they're going to live together for the rest of their life, but they sort of are, and that's the weird, complicated nature of it. Is sort of exploring like what are these relationships in life, and what is the meaning of a romantic relationship versus just a relationship between friends that is going to span a lifetime, and they are going to be like reliant on each other, and you know.
Since you're sort of going there, right now. I want to, maybe we'll just talk about the end of the film, the final scene, and then I want to come back and talk about some of the aesthetic choices in the movie also. I was really surprised by the last scene of the movie. I thought it was, in its own kind of quiet way, a little bit radical and provocative also. That, without giving anything away for people who are going to see the movie, that a new sort of family has been created, in a way, an alternate to something else we had expected in the final third of the movie. And that was really interesting. And I'm not sure if you intended it to be that way, but I definitely read it that way. And I thought it was interesting. I thought it was original and unique. And I'm not sure what you can say about that without giving it away, but...
Yeah.
I think, I guess without giving it away, I mean, I think it felt inevitable for us because we were like that there would be an ending that, I mean, here's the thing, this whole movie is about the perspective of the camera. So if you swing the lens, if you swing the perspective toward Kyle, toward Marissa and Kyle's story, I'm
down the street.
I'm the antagonist, and this whole thing is about their experience of this sort of toxic friend coming back into their lives and trying to ruin it all, and that is a valid story to tell. And I think if you swing the perspective a bit, if we showcased a different moment, even in that day or in that week between Kyle and Marissa, and what continues on with them, you might go, oh my God, look at this messy, beautiful thing that continues and is created and exists, because life is complicated. And, if people are together or they are separated or whatever happens, like it's often never black and white, and they still have these real emotions and things. So, but the story we were telling was about this friendship. So there was this interesting opportunity to shift the perspective and create this sort of like not false, but this sort of romanticized version of what might be with this friendship and this family that's been created. Mm-hmm. And that's valid too, because that does exist in this world.
Gail is terrific in the movie, playing kind of the odd man out in a way, and she's got a really wonderful scene with you where she comes into the shop and you're making cappuccinos, and you even make cappuccinos in a very funny way. There's something very funny about the business you're doing with the other customer in the store.
Having had to drink them take after take, I would agree.
But I thought she was an interesting character in her own right, because she's only in a handful of scenes, and yet she also has that messy complexity about her. And I thought that was interesting. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the structure of the film and the chapters of the film and some of the ways that you shot the film. You like long takes, don't you?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
I'm just kidding. No, I mean, yeah. What I like about that approach to filmmaking and why we did it in this is, like, I like living in the moment with characters, and I like the immediacy that's created with the actors and the realness of the truthful performance that can be found when everyone just has to perform for 9 or 10 minutes. And there's a messiness to that, and there's some stumbled lines, and they're in the movie, and I love that. And like that, everyone's really doing the things that are happening, and there's something really organic and lovely about that. And I think our challenge going into this movie was keeping that intact while letting the camera be a really active participant in telling the story, and letting it be a bit more elaborate and choreographed and I don't want to say ornamented, but like to get a little bit, to change it up so that the camera perspective is always shifting on us, and we're always going, why am I looking at this from here? Why is it shaky all of a sudden? Why is it sitting still? And trying to find motivation for that the entire time.
I thought one of the great shots in the film was the long tracking shot at Christmas Eve outside the house, where you're sort of passing from window to window. And when we talk about Robert Altman and the overlapping conversation, or at least the conversation from room to room. So I thought that was a really interesting choice to have you before you went into the house, to actually be observing what you're about to walk into, and all the kind of color and liveliness in the family. Yeah. Some really funny dialogue about... for example, ham not getting its due, or being, isn't that, what's the line exactly?
Because I never understood the general acceptance of bad ham in America.
Bad ham in America,
That's
yeah.
right, yes.
So that's all interesting stuff, and certainly from an editing perspective as well. I mean, when you make an elliptical movie, you have to really be on your editing game to make sure that story is told effectively, right? Tell me a little bit about that.
The edit was.
You're taking out the things we might be expecting to see. Right?
Yeah, it was intense. I mean, it was a very different editing process. I think we started off with Kyle and I, an assistant editor, and a friend who's a great editor, who sort of like just chopping scenes up and trying different things and sound editing and really putting together this like rough assembly of the movie, and then finding it to be like good but not great. And going, okay, we need to really find the rhythm of this film, and that's going to require really focusing on the in and out points of scenes and figuring out how to way to make this thing like flow like we never imagined or like it hasn't yet. And so we brought in this amazing editor, Sarah Shaw, who kind of came in and questioned everything and tried chopping up the movie into like with like cuts everywhere and tried some really, really intense things that weren't sort of what we set out to do at the beginning. And I think in doing that, allowed us to really come back to and find this beautiful like version of the film that we had tested. We had pressure tested every moment the best we could. And with the idea that, look, if the movie works better, cut up, with more cuts in a scene, then we're going to use that. And that's okay. And so it really was like it was a very thorough, way of examining it.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the editing, I think, really happened in the rehearsal days because the conversation was, oh, okay, is this too long? Is this too short? Are you getting these beats? So a lot of the editing happened during the rehearsal when we'd sit around and Mike would be like, all right, I think this is too long or this is too short, and we'd stack it into our assembly edit and know, like, okay, this is sort of what's missing. So there was a weird thing where we did edit afterwards, but it's the editing you would traditionally do in a cutting room. He was doing in a hotel room, watching the rehearsals and being like, oh, okay, this is too much time here, or we need to focus on this moment, see this moment tomorrow, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that was an interesting process.
Kyle, how important is the song Rockabye to you?
I mean, now it's everything. It's so funny because I would just walk down the streets in New York when we were rehearsing, and I had to learn the lyrics, so I'd have my earphones in and I'd just be singing Rockabye over and over and over again.
But we all heard it so many times, you must have known it.
I did know it. I did know, but I didn't want to mess it up, and I wanted to get like the cadence right.
Has Sean Mullins contacted you yet?
I'm waiting for the call from Sean Mullins. He actually, I watched him sing the song live recently, and I was like, he still got it, man. Really? He did like a live he did like a live recording of it.
I saw him perform at Jingle Ball '98 in New York, and I'll still never forget it.
And you said, I want to use that song in a film someday.
For sure. It was really about what it was like trying to find. It was either that or we're going to do like Eagle Eye Cherry or like. But when we started playing with a couple of those different songs from that time period, because the idea was like it was a song from when they all were in middle school, and for our age that was like 7th, 8th, 9th grade, whatever, and that was sort of that moment in time, and it was like really kind of specific to us, and we were like this. And then it was about, can we clear the song, and we had to clear it kind of in advance, and so we went out and when we got the rights to that, we were like, great, we're not going to go try to get anything else.
Mm-hmm. What's the thing you like most about working with him?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
He caught you on that one.
He's quite jolly. No, Kyle's one of those guys who, he's like a creative genius in that you can give him any, like you could say, hey, I need an idea for this. And you just go, it's between this and this. Like these are the confines of it. And within like 20 minutes, he'll have like 10 of the best ideas you've ever heard. And you might want to actually do 2 of them, but like they're brilliant and they're out there and they're different. And they're, and he's just got like this effusively creative mind, probably because he worked in advertising for so long. But I think it's just inherent to who he is, and he's like a really, just a brilliant collaborator in that, like, yeah, it's always a very safe space.
Kyle, what's Michael's worst quality that's inherent to who he is?
Oh, man. We don't have long enough time.
His worst characteristic? No, I think his worst characteristic is still a great characteristic. I think his worst characteristic is how specifically he wants things. You know, the detail at which he wants the thing he wants. So that I think is challenging at certain times, but I think most of the time results in great product because it's questioned down to the very sort of the bottom of the.
This is like the job interview where they say, "What's your worst?"
It's exactly.
I know, but you're giving me the worst
attention
one.
to detail.
He's trying to sidestep
You
it.
need to flip it around and let me get some catharsis out of this.
What's the best part about your jobs?
I mean, this is the fact that we get to come up with an idea from scratch and then go and like create it and bring hundreds of people together and figure out a way to like play make-believe in front of cameras and then figure out a way to put that into like one thing that then goes out. I don't know. It's just like I still constantly go, how did I get here doing this? Because it was always sort of this dream that I didn't understand how to, like, if I would ever get to do or how it would ever be done. Mm-hmm. And then we just sort of kept like doing jobs that were adjacent to filmmaking or the things we wanted to do. And then eventually like kept slipping in the side door to where now we got to do this.
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't have to look at me. I think that's. I feel the same way. I think it's the same thing. For me, I think it's the moment of creation always feels really special to me. So like in that moment when you find something or you discover something, whether that's in the writing process or in the acting process or whatever, whenever that sort of moment hits and you get this like rush of a feeling of having found something that you really respond to, that I think that's the catnip.
It's like those unexpected little miracles where like either you're on set and all of a sudden everyone jives and gets the same idea and it starts to work and it creates this like magical moment where you're like, what did we just do? Mm-hmm. Or you're like sitting in a dark editing room for weeks on end and you're like, oh my God, what do I do? And then you find this one song on Spotify and you're like, rip that, put it on, let's see. And then you hear it and you go, oh my God, it works. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and you're like, I can sleep again finally because like I fixed this one little 45-second moment in the movie that was barren and needing some sort of musical underscore.
You guys met making commercials together. You produced movies together. And now you're in a movie that you've co-written and directed. What happens now? I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of opportunity. There are different ways new directors go. You might be courted to be, at some point, directing a Marvel movie. Who knows? You know?
I already turned 2 down.
Turned it down? You might
two.
want to make another indie comedy. What is the next dream?
I think the next dream is to make another movie. The opportunity to make another movie in any way, shape, or form always feels like a miracle. So I think we now have the opportunity to make his next film, and we're actively pursuing it. And we have a lot of other opportunities. And I think the really interesting thing for us is we come from producing. So like we've been building up and stockpiling projects that we'd love to see made, and now all of a sudden have the opportunity to let some of those out into the world, and I think that's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now we have like a little more ability. We have the ability to like take some of these really cool, amazing filmmakers that we've worked with over the years, or that we've met and admire, and say like, hey, can we help make this thing while we're still figuring out what story we want to tell over here? How do we like help produce this other movie? And so I think that's part of what we aspire to do, which is just like continue to create interesting films and then eventually TV and just stuff that we respond strongly to.
What is your feeling about American comedies today in the movies? They seem more and more driven by, high concept, way out there, hijinks, pratfalls, and you've made a movie that's the opposite of that, that's 10 times funnier, probably. What do you think about American comedies today versus stuff we talked about earlier, like The Graduate, like The Odd Couple, like what we used to do, which was comedy coming out of people?
It's hard. I think it's hard to make a referendum about a broad such a broad thing. I guess it's easy. It is easy to do. I don't want to make a broad referendum on American comedy, but I do think the things that we love, we do pratfalls and hijinks. We literally do pratfalls and hijinks in ours. But I think what we put first is character. And making sure that we have a storyline that feels really genuine and interesting to us, and then we could inject as much pratfalls or as big of jokes as we want. And I think the films we respond the most positively to in the comedy sense are films that do that same thing. Even movies like Dumb and Dumber, you feel for those guys. Both those characters feel like well-formed characters, and you believe in their intentions and what they're doing. And as far as they go, I always was like, yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm in the bathroom at the ski chalet. I'm with you always. And to me, I think that's the saving grace of where comedy could go. I believe in comedy in America, and I want to see it succeed in any form, because I want people to go to the movies and laugh.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to just say, studio comedies are there's a state of affairs going on that isn't great, because I mean, you could just look at the box office numbers of the majority of them and say, okay, there's something dwindling. But I think they're still being made. I think there's still great comedies being made. I think that the challenge is these formulas, and I think it's a product of the way our industry sort of works. Is we're and maybe it's partially the feeder system that goes into those big budget comedies. There's a, I think the aesthetic has a lot to do with it. There's this pressure to get jokes out per minute, per scene, and they test them in certain ways. And if a movie doesn't test certain ways, then it's sort of retooled and to punch up certain jokes. And sometimes that maybe makes the emotional journey of the characters suffer. And so I think that the comedies you're speaking to and responding to are, I guess, for lack of a better word, a bit more singular in their origination and their approach, because they have that patience or that ability for someone to say, no, we're not gonna go for this joke right now. And I think a lot of times what bigger comedies need is time without laughter, and moments where just interesting things are happening on screen where you're not laughing, so that you can get ready. It's like a horror film with jump scares every 2 minutes. It's exhausting. Whereas, what are the horror films that people are responding to most strongly over the last 4 or 5 years? Get Out, Hereditary, The Witch, Babadook, all these films that are provocative and thoughtful. And so I think audiences are getting smarter and smarter and more in tune, and the theater, people are going to the theaters less, and there's these two things going on with the comedy, which is Netflix is involved in comedy in a very real way. Comedies are not inherently meant to be viewed in your bed with your partner by yourself. You can view them that way, and they're highly entertaining that way because they're comfortable and they're easy to turn on, and they don't they don't require a lot of heavy lifting. But the best experiences I've ever had in a theater are watching watching Something About Mary, or watching even when I saw The Waterboy in theater. I'll never.
Community, you mean?
Because I had to sit in the aisle. I remember sitting on the floor because the tickets were sold out. I had to buy tickets to the movie Ants, and then I snuck into Waterboy, and I remember sitting on the floor in the aisle, and the entire theater was rolling in a way that it was a heyday of Adam Sandler, and it was in a way that I don't remember experiencing. I haven't remember experiencing since, and that's a very special thing, and that's something that I think Bridesmaid probably did. I think Judd Apatow has been able to figure out how to do it time and time again. But there are few. It's not. It's becoming more and more rare, and I think that that's the thing that the theater going experience is sort of for, is the communal laughter, if anything.